All right, so in this video, we're going to introduce our final topic of the semester, and that topic is databases. All right, so we're going to do two things. We're going to do a relatively short set of notes, probably shorter than most of the notes that we take, and I'll do a quick demonstration of how to access the database features and use them in App Inventor. Okay, so with that said, let's go ahead and get started. So, databases, that's our topic here today. And what we're going to do is look at a couple different learning objectives here. This looks like a lot, but like I said, this is really actually a fairly short set of notes. We're going to review very quickly what a variable is. We are going to review what an list is and what an index is. Now, those are the things we've learned most recently, so hopefully you're familiar with those and comfortable with those. Variables we've been using all year long, so hopefully you're pretty familiar with those. And then we're going to talk about a database and a tag. You're going to need to know what those are, and you're going to be able to use a database and a tag. All right, so those are our learning objectives for this video. First, some review, some things that we've learned before. What is a variable? So you should know either a working definition or this kind of loose idea metaphor that we've been using all year long, but something should come to mind when I ask what is a variable, all right? In this case, the actual definition is it's a place in the computer program where data is being stored, all right? It's a location for storing data in your computer program, all right? A list, remember, is a special kind of variable that's capable of storing multiple pieces of data, all right? So we used a metaphor to kind of explain how these two things work. And we've been saying that variables are kind of like a file folder, okay? So if I've got a file folder, I can go over to that folder and I can put a piece of paper in that folder, but variables are only able to hold one piece of data at a time. So it's like it can only hold one piece of paper at a time, all right? That's all that we can put in that folder. But a list, we talked about, is more robust. It's more like a file cabinet. So now inside of that list, you can have multiple pieces of data. So you've got multiple folders. And then what we did was we said in order to find the data that you need in that list, because a file cabinet's big, right? There's lots of stuff in the file cabinet. What we do is we give each folder a number, and that number is called an index. In App Inventor, we give the first folder a 1, and the second folder a 2, and so on and so forth. In other computer programs, we start counting with 0. I mentioned that again because in just a couple weeks, we're going to be switching to a new computer language. And in that language, we're going to start counting with 0. Okay, but for right now, in App Inventor, our lists start counting with 1. So the first folder is 1, second folder is 2, so on and so forth. All right, so there's what we've talked about so far. Variables are a place in the computer program that stores data. A list is a special kind of variable, which means it's also in the computer program and it's also storing data. The difference is a normal variable can only hold one piece of data, but a list can hold multiple pieces of data. And then the last thing is the way you find a specific piece of data within a list is you need to know what its index is. All right? So that's all review. Now, let's get to the new stuff, databases. All right? So first of all, what is a database? Well, the definition is kind of vague. It's an organized collection of data, okay? The key thing here to realize is that it's a collection of data. It's not like a variable where it's just one piece of data. It's not even like a list where you're allowed to put in a couple different pieces of data. It's a whole collection, all right? So there's lots of stuff flying around here in the database. Okay, the next definition that you're going to need to know is a tag. So tags, nowadays, we're a little bit more familiar with tags because we use hashtags in social media, right? So you know, if you go into your favorite social media program, whatever it is, and you type in a search, for hashtag Christmas present, you're going to see all the posts that have to do with Christmas presents, right? So a tag in a database, that's the basic idea. A tag is a label that you give the data so that you can find it. Now, there's a key difference, though. In social media, you can use that same hashtag for lots of different entries. So I can put in my post about Christmas presents and hashtag Christmas present, and somebody else can put in another post about Christmas presents and they can hashtag Christmas presents, and we can put in lots and lots of things that all have the same hashtag. In a database, you can only use a tag once. So you're going to have to develop a system in your database for how you find data. With the program that we're going to start tomorrow, I'll provide some suggestions of how you might do that. But that's the first thing, or these are the first two, really the only two definitions for this set of notes. The database is this large collection of data, and the tag is the information that you give, or the label that you give to the data so you can find it later. It's kind of like a street address for your house, right? If you want somebody to find your house, what you do is you give them the address, and that provides them the means to say, okay, I'm going to go to this town, and then I'm going to go to this street, and then I'm going to go to this number on the street, right? That's kind of how tags work inside of the database. Okay, so let's go. If we want to use our file folder and file cabinet metaphor again, we can extend this out. So if the variable is like a folder, it can only hold one piece of information, and the list is like a file cabinet, it can hold multiple pieces of information, then a database is like an entire room that has lots of file cabinets and folders in it. So realize what that's saying is, in my database, I can put lists, I can put file cabinets, and I can put variables, I can put single pieces of data. I can do all kinds of stuff like that in my database. So it's a large collection, okay? Now, there are some key differences between databases and variables. The first and probably the biggest difference as far as our class is concerned is that the database is not actually part of the program. Your variable and your list, they are in the program. So when you initialize your program, you have to declare your variables. You have to initialize your variables. You have to define those things at the beginning of your program so your program knows to use it. The database isn't like that. It's a more robust storage system, and so it uses more memory, and so it needs to be stored someplace more secure or more robust than just inside of your program. So because it's not in the program, you don't have to initialize it like a variable. I should probably mention real quick. I think it's, yeah, it says it on this. There's two kinds of, or there's more than two, but there's multiple kinds of different databases. You might think of like Google Drive as being a database, right? So that's a web-based database. Google has these servers somewhere in the world. It's kind of, you know, a corporate secret where these servers are, but they've got servers out there someplace, and we can access the information that's stored in that database through the internet. Some companies have databases in their company that you can only access in the company, okay? So it's not on the internet for everybody to get to. You have to be there at the company in the building to access that. And you know, you probably have seen movies where there's these big server rooms with all these towers of computers, right? That's the kind of the idea. We've got this place to store lots of data in the company, in the server room. What we will use is something that's called a local database. Local databases are stored right on the device, okay? So it's part of the phone, or it's part of the tablet that, that is where the database is stored. So you don't need to be able to connect to the internet. You don't need to go to a special location or plug into a particular internet or LAN or anything like that. It's stored right on their phone, okay? So because it's part of their phone, you bring it into your program the same way you would a camera. So if you watch the little video here, it clicks on the tool drawer that's called storage. And in the storage tool drawer, there's something called a TinyDB. That's our database. And if you just drag it into the program while you're in Designer View, if you just drag it into the program from Designer View, you'll see that it adds it down here at the bottom of the program. Okay, so if you watch that video one more time, they're dragging in TinyDB. and then it just adds it down at the bottom of the program down there. Okay, so that's the basic idea for the database. Because it's part of the phone, you don't need to initialize it, you just need to drag it onto the screen in the designer view. All right, now one other important set of differences. Because it's not part of your program, that means when the program gets closed down, the data is still on the phone and still accessible, okay? So one of the things that can happen in this next program that we're writing is you can run the program and start testing it while you're in App Inventor, and then close it down, do some changes in App Inventor, open it back up to run it again, and the data will still be there. It'll already be in the program because the data is not stored in the program, it's stored on the tablet, all right? But that also creates a security issue, right? So if I'm working with data on my phone or on my tablet and that data gets saved there, then the next program I open up can access that data. So this is where, you know, if we were looking at, you know, bigger picture kind of stuff, I'd have to start worrying about, you know, do I need to encrypt it? Do I need to use tags that are very funky and unique so that people can't guess what my tags are? How do I protect my data from other people who maybe don't have the best intention for the data that's stored on that phone, okay? And that problem compounds if the data is stored in a place where everybody can get to it, right? Like Google Drive, that's something that anybody can get to from anywhere in the world at any time. So Google has to put different things in place to make sure the data in that database is very secure so that hackers can't just come in and steal your information or manipulate your information in a way that could harm you. All right, so in our class, that's not really a big deal, but it's something that you do have to be aware of, particularly if you decide to move forward in programming. Okay, so that really is it as far as our notes are concerned. The next thing I want to do is take a minute to look at the database in App Inventor. Okay, so here I'm in App Inventor, and like I said, when you're in the designer view, all you're going to do is scroll down to the storage tool drawer, and in the storage tool drawer, that's where our TinyDB is. The TinyDB is the one that's stored on the tablet. That's the one that we're going to want. As you can see, there's a cloud and there's a web database that's available to us. That's beyond the scope of our class. We're just going to use the TinyDB. That's the database that's stored right on the phone. Okay, and just like with the camera or the notifier or any of those things, it adds it down here at the bottom and it adds it over here. All right, so how will you use the database? Where are the blocks? Okay, well, just like anything else, the blocks are going to be in the tool drawer for the database. And you can see there's not very many blocks. This is it. This is all of them right here. There's not a lot, okay? The first one is pretty obvious. This one deletes all the data in the TinyDB, okay? So if you have a situation, maybe for security reasons or whatever, where you want all of the information to be erased, then you're going to take this block and you're going to put it into an event handler. So maybe you have a button that says clear data, and then you have an event handler for when that button gets clicked, and you drop this right into the event handler and you go, okay? So this deletes the data in your TinyDB. Now, the other thing is you can delete just little pieces of information. So if I don't want to delete all the data, I just want to delete certain tags, data associated with certain tags, then I can use this block for that too. All right, so that's another option. What we will use the most in our next program is the, whoops, don't want that, is the call and the store block. I'm sorry, the get value and the store block. Okay, they're called because these are procedures, right? We've talked about procedures. But this procedure is the get value procedure. So you can probably figure out what that's doing. It's going to the database to get data from the database. Okay, and then this block is the store block. It's going to the database to put information or data into the database. So these are the two things you're going to use the most. You'll see both of them have a spot for the tag. So remember, the tag is how you're going to label the data. And normally we just label it with some kind of a string is what we normally do. So maybe I've got a piece of information called data number 1. And so, or whatever tag you want to give it. Again, you're going to have a tag system that makes sense to you for your program. The backlog for the program gives some suggestions, but you can come up with your own, and that's fine. Okay, and I'm going to, so this, what this will do is it will go to the database. It'll look for data that's tagged data1. If it cannot find that tag, then that's what this spot does. So this program, this function, this procedure is going to return something. If there's data in the database, then that's what it's going to return. So if I have stored in the database, I don't know, the number 10, and I've tagged that as data1, then this block is going to return the number 10. You know, so maybe I want to, you know, print this in a label. So I'd have a label on my home screen, and I would connect this to set text to, and this would print the number 10. But if it cannot find this tag, if I haven't stored anything with that tag, whatever you put right here is what it's going to return. So maybe I return an empty string, or maybe there's a number that I want to return, or whatever the case may be. But what it's going to do is if it can't find this tag, then this is the number, the answer that the procedure is going to give us. Right? So that's the way the get value function works. And then, like I said, you can see it's got a tab here. So you're going to connect this to something. You're going to connect this maybe to be some variables value. Okay, something like that maybe. Oh, that reminds me of an issue. See how that gave me an error? One thing you have to be careful of is when you initialize a variable, App Inventor will not allow you to initialize it to something in a database. Okay, so what you'll need to do is initialize it first, and then in some event handler, what you'll do is you'll set the variable to what's in the database. Okay, so what I have right here is a way to initialize a variable to be what's in the database. First, I define the variable, and I just put in some dummy information right here. And then, when the screen is initialized, I set the variable to be equal to the data that it got from the database. Okay, so that's the way the get value works. The other block that you'll use a lot is the store value. So once I have some piece of data that I've stored, then the store value block is going to put that information into my database. So just like before, I need a tag, so whatever name you want to give it, but I need some tag that's going to label the data. And then I need, you know, whatever sort of information is I'm going to store. So maybe I'm going to store the number 5 or something. I don't know, whatever it is, depending on the program that you're writing. You might be storing the answer to a question. You might be storing the value of a variable. You might be storing all kinds of different things. Whatever it is you're going to store, you would put that thing right here. Okay, so this is the basic idea of how these things work. Like I said, these are the two blocks that you'll use the most, but on occasion you might need to delete information, or you might want to build in the ability to delete all the data in your database so that you don't have issues of you know, memory when you're trying to test your app. Okay, so that's the basic idea for databases. Those are the basic blocks that you're going to be using. Those are the definitions that you're going to need. What is a database? What is a tag? And then how do you use those things to store and retrieve data? All right, thanks for watching. Have a good one.